I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, or possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you, listener, for tuning into this episode of the Oracles with James Tyson. Today, I'm bringing back, kicking and screaming, Laurie Wheeler. She's an author and just has a book released called Oh No, Not Another Learning Experience, a Metamorphosis. It's kind of a bit of a synopsis of where she's come in her life to now. For those of you who are our Patreon subscribers, that $3 a month subscription that gets you into a draw every month for the past life regression, psychic reading, and astrological chart. Laurie Wheeler is December's past life regression person, so she's donated that to our listeners or our supporters who are in for the draws through Patreon. Laurie's been a holistic practitioner since about 1995, a homeopathic practitioner. She practices shamanism. She works with reading energy, channeling, and past life, and between life soul regression. We're going to talk to her a lot about between life soul regression. Her approach focuses on the state of wellness for both mind and body, so nurturing one on a path to find and develop a more authentic self. Now, what I've always called, being on path, we're going to talk about that being part of being actually true to the contract that you had before you entered this life with your guides. We are going to talk about spirit guides and other beings that are around us, and we're going to discuss her experiences with the soul, and our souls being not only human souls coming back and keep coming and trying to check off our soul bucket list, but interplanetary beings that come to this world plane, come to this dimension on Earth for experiences. And we'll talk a lot about that, actually. She inspires, through her conversations, kind of this passion and motivation. And she really promotes that purpose of living. Like, find out what your goal is, what you're supposed to be doing here, or you're going to end up having to come back and redo it. But, we're all on various steps to get to our higher selves, I shouldn't say our higher selves, because that's a whole other being. Get to our enlightenment, or the end of our experience in this plane, or on this planet we have spinning through space. If you ever wondered if you were what you were meant for, or felt a deep longing for some home you've never known, or felt out of place where you live now, have you ever wondered who you were without the stories that you tell yourself about yourself, the experiences that you tangibly have every day? And then you think you have other experiences. Well, in this area, it's difficult to find anyone who has not had at least a blush with the realities of seemingly not of this world. And there are those for whom such experiences are normal and deemed to be an everyday reality. And with Laurie Wheeler, she is one of those individuals who has chosen to share her reality and real life journey into becoming a believer. And she discusses how, we touch on this briefly, but it's mostly in her book. She touches on it from a mysterious tree on their property in New York State, which introduced her to the abilities to confront an alien during one of her clients' soul regressions. Laurie connects the dots in just a myriad of experiences to piece together her true purpose here on Earth, and her connection to her soul's home. And we're going to touch on where that is. See, in doing so, she helps others open up to their authentic selves along the way through her shamanism, energy work, and her soul regressions. In her book, Oh No, Not Another Learning Experience, she tackles these tough questions about our soul's purpose, our lifetime, spirit guides, extraterrestrials, and much more. And we're going through kind of checking those off as we go through in our interview. Laurie's fascinating. If you are around the Midwest, or I shouldn't say Midwest, she's down in New Mexico, usually this time of year. She and her husband go to a lot of different conferences, anything from spiritual conferences to UFO conferences, because she does interact with those beings. Very, very interesting. Her book is drawn from her personal experiences, not only as a homeopath, a medical intuitive healer, but as an interplanetary soul. And we're going to talk about interplanetary souls and what that really means. And if you'd like to follow along at home, go to our website, wellnesswithin.net. Again, that's wellnesswithin.net. Laurie, how are you today?
I am very good, James. Thank you. And thank you for having me on today.
Oh, thanks for coming back. This is great. And especially with your book coming out. It just came out. Oh, no, Another Learning Experience, a Metamorphosis. That's fascinating. I've gone through a little bit of the synopsis on it, and it's going to be fascinating. I definitely have to grab this pretty quick.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a memoir, actually, and I call it a memoir of the metamorphosis of my soul. Although within it, a lot of experience coming through both personally and professionally. But what its main object is about is to learn the answer, or what I had to learn is to understand the answer to the question, what's it all about? You know, there's a song from long ago, and I've said this numerous times over the years in my head. What's it all about, Alfie? And you know, I don't know, you're old enough to remember possibly, and I certainly, it comes from my time, but you know, that's a good question. What is all of this about? And so I sort of feel that over the years, professionally, and just in speaking with people casually, there are so many questions and so much wonderment about specifics, about the soul, about our purpose, about what is it? Why are we here? All of this. And there's no one real, little clear answer to it. But I think I sort of narrowed it down through my own learning over the years. And I have been, I want to say, aware since I was a real little child. But then I lost some of it, although I was still kind of in tune with things, with my intuition. I've always had intuition and listened, but never really got on board completely with the understanding of spirits and such. I believed in angels, but I don't know from that point on how much I believed in, because I was raised Catholic. So you're taught to believe a certain way. And then something occurs maybe in your life that opens up a whole realm of thinking possibly in a different way, or looking at life from a different perspective. And so I think this book explores questions like wondering if you're meant for something of a specific purpose here, and if you've ever had a longing somewhere within yourself of a place that is not of the earth. And for those of us that have always felt out of place since very, very young. And it explores also who we are without the stories we tell ourselves or that we have incurred in our life. So I've tried to bring this to an awareness, through my own experiences. And that's why I entitled the book, Oh No, Not Another Learning Experience.
Yeah, I can see that. Knowing you and knowing a bit about your background, I think you have learning experiences every couple of months, like the big one. It's fascinating. Looking back, or what you just said, I think this relates to a lot of people. It's your memoirs about your learning experiences and your I don't want to say supernatural, but your outside of the box experiences do resonate with a lot of other people. Me for one, and I know that there are people out there constantly wondering, as we're awakening in this time, more people awakening since I think since about 2012, or maybe even a bit earlier, that are coming into more of a spiritual understanding of the world around them. And I think this book will resonate with them, and your stories are going to resonate with them quite well, because you're just one of those people that have those experiences that are quite, I almost say, flashy. They're kind of big and in your face, where a lot of people's might be smaller and they haven't paid attention to them yet. And I think Spirit's like slapping them in the head, saying, hey, pay attention to this. You should have turned left. You should have turned left. You should have turned right there. You would have seen it. And they're still kind of, yeah, I'll get there soon. And again, like you say, you were raised Catholic, so you had a different way of believing and different belief system and different way of looking at things that we now deem as more spiritual than old school religion, and the mix of the two. So it's interesting that you can take a step back, Laurie, and look at your own life and go, oh, this was a turning point. Can you tell me what was one of the bigger turning points in hindsight, looking back with the more spiritual brain that you have now, the mind, looking back as a child or as a teen or in when you were younger, what was a big turning point for you?
Well, I'll answer that in a second. And I begin the book by actually talking about what I consider to be the turning point for me. But I do want to go back to people's experiences and those that are wondering and those that are awakening now. And we're in a time where what's happening on the whole earth, the earth itself is moving through a raising of the vibration. There are numerous places within our galaxy, and I don't want to even say places, beings, and this is all a simultaneous happening. It's not just for the people on Earth whose vibration is adjusting. This is what we'll call major shift. So as we are reflective of everything else, as we change, so does a lot of other cosmic happening. So this is a huge shift, and if you just look at the year 2020, and that could all be a whole topic of conversation, this is a time of really getting clarity and visual, for what was behind me and what am I going into. Turn of, every 10 years, a new year, a big shift in the cosmos and such. But so back to the concept of writing the book is exactly that. For all of us, there are those that are just waking up, and it is for those people. It is for people that know what they know and may want to know more. They may want to feel comfortable that there are other people learning and how they learn. And then there are those of us that have really moved beyond and have quite a strong sense of awareness and connection to ourselves and to the cosmic happening. But still, we are always learning. That's what we're doing here. And so there'll never be a time that we're not learning. And so even when I go back and I reread my own information, I'm still continuing to teach myself, oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, let me not forget this, because we are human beings, and we do. So we do forget, or we do need to be more remembering what we're doing here and why. And I think that's important. So like I said, I've had this connection since I was really little. In fact, I can back up prior to that. I've come to understand my soul is not of the earth. In other words, I originated from another place. I've embodied as a human being, but we are called interplanetary souls, those of us that come from another place, another soul's home. And when I realized this, I was completely intrigued, but also had many answers then to why I feel and have felt all my life the way I do. So it was greatly helpful for me to have this information, but then intrigued, okay, what is my purpose here then? I didn't just do this haphazardly. There is reason for every single soul that is on the earth of why you choose to come. And that comes from the contract you create before you embody, what we call between lives or between incarnations. You meet with your counsel, you meet with your higher self, which is the soul in your spirit form. You may meet with your master spirit guide, that which has been with you for a very long time. So all these spirits come together and you create a contract, a purpose for coming in and incarnating again. One, to release your karma or heal and work it through. To bring in your dharma, which are your capabilities that you have learned through previous time. So some of us, those who are IPs or interplanetaries, we have come from another place and we have lived numerous times in other places, just like Earth, but other places, and learned what we've learned. And then we go back and we share our information. And that's part of my purpose, is to learn here on Earth what happens, what is life really about here, and bring it back to what I call my beings, where I come from. So there is more learning so that we can all grow, all cosmic beings growing. Those that decide to incarnate time after time as an earth-based soul. There are those that are younger souls that are just coming in as a young soul and not having incarnated many times. And then there are those that are very old souls that continue to incarnate on the earth. They may have had several times somewhere else, but the majority of their lifetimes have been on earth, and they help to bring humanity forward also. So the soul is a very intricate and interesting understanding, and how the evolution of it all goes. And there's just so much information to be learned about it. But in this learning, this has helped me understand what my purpose is and keep me on a track so that I can keep my focus of what I'm doing here, because I don't want to come to the end of this lifetime, go to my review and understand between lives when I meet again with my counsel and such, and say, gee, I didn't fulfill my contract. That is not the nature of why I wanted to be here at this time. So it helps to keep me focused and moving in a direction, but also helps me understand what I'm doing here and gives reason to why things are what they are.
How do you know what your contract is?
Well, that's a good question. So one of the modalities I work in is past life soul regression and between life soul regression. And usually when you take someone into a trance-like state, which is a lowering of the frequency of the brain waves, and we do it every day in our coming into waking time and going into sleep time, the brain waves are adjusting. So as you bring somebody into a regressed state and you bring them into a trance-like state, that's when you can begin to access all of this information through questions. Now, usually what I have somebody do is fill out some important information, and one of that being maybe 5 or 6 questions that they might want to ask their master spirit guide and their counsel and such, so that when they are in that state, I have that information in front of me. My job as the practitioner is to have that person have the greatest experience. That means uncover the questions, these burning questions that we have. And most people will come in and ask, what is my purpose for being here? Because we really want to know. So this is all done in this type of state where the veil can be pulled back and we have access into the cosmos, I say.
Well, it's fascinating. The reason I asked that was not only for my listener, but 3 days ago, I had a quick reading with a friend of mine who said, I said, was my spirit guide changed? Because I had, for the longest time, I had, as my guide was Pan Gohart, like the Pan, the Greek god of the hillside. Mm-hmm. So elemental. And because I've been going through some stuff, and I checked to see if he was still around, and she goes, "Oh no, and he's really mad at you. His name is Narith, and you have to talk to him because you are not fulfilling your contract." And I thought, okay, I don't know what that means. So this is very poignant that you showed up at this time, because she explained that you've got to go through meditation, you have to surround yourself by your gatekeepers and your guides, and you have to ask permission to see and hear him, because you can't just walk up and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you." You actually have to ask, or in this case, I have to ask his permission to be able to see and hear him. And I've been trying for the last couple of days in meditation to get there, and I'm all over the place. It's just like I get close, and then it's like fireworks in my head. So I'm still working on that, but I need to, maybe I need one of these between life things, because it sounds like an easier step than fighting.
Well, James, let me tell you, there is a bit of a difference, okay, in how you're approaching it. And I say that for a particular reason. So I've worked in energy for over 25 years, reading it, feeling it with all my senses, my clairabilities, so to speak, okay? But it is different when you take somebody into this state, and what happens for them is they are the ones that are actually experiencing it. So in other words, if somebody reads energy and tells you some information, this is great, but you're not the one actually experiencing it. Now you try to get yourself into a meditative state, but it may not be deep enough. This is why taking someone into this very, very deep hypnotic state to access the information, the greatest part of this experience is just this, that it is your personal own experience that you're going through, you, the client. It's not for me, it's not for anybody else, but you are experiencing it at levels that I can't even explain. And more times than not, 90% of the people will come out of an experience and they will tell me, wow, that was not what I expected. And because it is so deep and rich and experiential, that you most times will not have quite that depth unless somebody has helped walk you into that really deep particular place and brought about the questions that need to be asked. And I've worked with shamanism for a very long time, and deep types of energy work and that. But this is a different type of experience, I want to say.
Oh, yeah, I believe it is. And I have had just a past life regression, which was fascinating to go through. But to go through one of these between soul ones, that would be, between life ones would be interesting, especially in this point in my life where I've been told that hey, I'm off contract. Heck, it didn't even dawn on me that, I thought it's like being on path. Kind of the same thing. You're on path, you're off path, but when she said the word contract, it was like, ooh, this is a little more formal than being off path.
And it's very specific. A lot of times people think their contract may have to do with the work they do. And it's not to say it doesn't, but that may be some form that it takes. You could be here to just learn how to relax in life and be happy. That could be your contract and the purpose for your coming. And then it could be very specific. Say you're here to support and help your brother through this lifetime. We can't really understand always what our contract is unless we go in specifically and access that information and then understanding it. So understanding it by possibly going into a past life to know what happened there and what that has to do with your current time and why you've come now and why you bring that contract in at this point and then what you need to do as a result of. And we also have sort of different purposes throughout our life. So, for example, when I was younger, my purpose was to get married and have my 4 children. And I talk about that in the book and my vision that I had in my very early 20s before I had any children. I was told this information, exactly how many, what they would be. Spatially, one was going to be a little behind the first 3 that came very, very quickly. And I knew it. And my purpose was to stay on my track. That was told to me for that reason. So not to deter from what my purpose was here. I was bringing or going to be here for these 4 souls coming in. So then raising the children. And then at a certain point in my life, my purpose again adjusted itself. So your purpose can be more or broader than one real specific idea. But the idea is to get through it. Now, some souls, when they come, because Earth plane can be a lot of fun in a sort of way, a lot of young souls liken it to say it's about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, if you get my drift. Yep. Okay. So, anybody probably really listening to this may not even be a young soul because they don't really have a lot of interest in this. They're more interested in other things. But there's a lot of deterrents that happen on Earth. Earth is a very emotion-based planet. And so a lot of times when people come, they're coming to work through some emotional situation. And so it's not always easy to keep on task. There are a lot of deterrents, and we need the help to stay on our focus and task if we do know what it is. And that's why we have our guides and such helping us. But it's very important for us to know, what are we really doing here? What is the purpose that I've come for? Because you want to know that, you want to fulfill it so that the concept after that is that you can evolve through eventually to ascension. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to come back and relive this again just to have to learn what I didn't learn the last time, so to speak,
Yeah, unless I'm I come back as one of those young souls and just party the whole time.
Oh, you won't.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
you. You won't. You can't go backwards, so to speak.
Drat! We are talking to Laurie D. Wheeler. Laurie Wheeler. Check her website out, www.wellnesswithin.com. That's wellness, not .com, .net. Wellnesswithin.net, Laurie Wheeler. And we're talking about her new book, Oh No, Not Another Learning Experience, a Metamorphosis. And it's about her experiences growing up and wanting to pass this on to those around the planet who are, possibly experiencing the same things, or we all are experiencing the same things. And it's just helping to point out a few of those little points in our life that we should be paying attention to, or even in hindsight, go back and go, oh, that's why that happened. Read the book and go, oh, that's why I saw that, and I should have turned left instead of right. What was it? Can you tell me about the what you experienced at a young age that kind of really opened your eyes to things other than like the traditional lives that people have?
Okay, so this is an interesting thought here. I'm sure many know that souls kind of come together in a pack or a pod, okay? And so many times mother or a father or both or siblings or such, we have come back time after time in different positions, different male-female roles and such to learn certain things. So our ancestors, or some of them, may very well be a part of our soul pod, okay? And that can be lifetime after lifetime, most times. And then when you're finished having learned what you came to learn, you'll leave that pod and go on to another pod. And that's very, in itself, that's a whole subject that I probably won't get into now. But the concept of coming back with other people that you recognize or know to have your learning experiences, and to evolve and grow from a female perspective, then from male perspective, from a mother perspective, father perspective. So I came in, both my parents being earth souls, okay, not being an IP. It was, what I'll say, challenging. And those challenges, the very heavy challenges of life, come to those that are capable of taking that on, that responsibility. So young souls wouldn't be given those depths of challenges because they're not capable. You might think of a young soul being like a young child. You wouldn't give the responsibility of a 25-year-old to a 4-year-old because they're not capable of handling it. So much the way the evolution of the soul works too. So if you look at your life and you look at the challenges in your life, sometimes that's a determining factor for you to understand how evolved your soul is. And there are other ways to know the color of your soul ray and such. There's numerous ways of understanding about the soul. But when I was young, let me put it this way. My grandmother on my mother's side was clairvoyant. She used to read tea leaves. And I always wanted to be able to do that when I was a little girl. My great-grandmother, her mother, was clairvoyant. And so down the lineage. And there are others in my relatives that are too. So this is a factor that occurs within your ancestors in lineage, that there may be numerous people that have the gift of vision in some way, or one of the clair abilities, and connected to intuition and such. So I've had this since the beginning. I came in with it, and I can remember at 4 or 5 laying in my bed talking to my spirits. And actually telling them how hard life really was and that I didn't want to stay here. And it being revealed to me through the spirits telling me I had a job to do and that I came for a reason. And so not that that was really the answer I wanted to hear, but in some way, I guess that helped me know that there's a purpose to being here and helped me go on and move through. And then it began to really come about. And I've always had it through growing up, but it really came about in my very early 20s and started to connect me more into spirit. And then I had the great awakening, I call it, in my 30s on my land that we built a house on in New York State. And that's where I begin the book. In the first chapter, I talk about what happened. And there was, and I'll just give a little skinny of it, there was a beautiful tree. You talk about the elementals, right? Mm-hmm. The tree, and trees are one of the souls and spirits that come to me and always share information with me. They are in my life for a very long time. And this tree brought me into a specific time that opened up some Native American learning. And it actually was a burial ground, and the souls came to me and spoke to me. And that was part of my awakening into this. There were hundreds of people that had been murdered on the land, and the tree, grandmother tree, I call it, she was the one that whispered and gave me the vision of this happening. And then there was a male Native American spirit that came and explained things to me and helped me learn about my gifts and shared the information. And so that was my awakening into this. But I must say that I know it has come to other people and they've not received their gifts because either they're too afraid or they don't want them. But I was really fortunate that at that moment I had the right guidance to walk me through the process so that I wasn't afraid as much as inquisitive and a lack of understanding. I was very, in a way, naive to all of this opening as it came so suddenly to me. But it was a great opening and a great learning experience again, and I just followed through with that.
Do you think, looking back at it now and where you are now, that was a real just, grabbing you by the shoulders and shaking you to get you going on the path that you have to be on to communicate this with other people, where maybe somebody else won't get that slap in the head? They'll get the little messages, and eventually, because maybe they're not on a path where they can communicate to the greatest number of people. Well, and you just happen to be one of those people that have that access or will have that access.
Yeah, part of that is really having to do with what I'm doing here, my purpose. So that's why it came in such a big way. And I'll add to what it did is on the land, my whole family became very ill from toxic water. And so at the same time of being very ill, what it did was sort of wipe out some of my left brain function, my memory, and my retention of information and such, so much so that I used to have to draw a map how to go to town. So that was difficult for me. Hindsight now, and having come through some of that and having spoken to my guides and such, I have a greater understanding of why that needed to happen. The need was so that I could get out of my own thinking process. And I'm a very detailed, analytical type of person. I want to just rip things apart and understand it from, the tiniest little minuscule understandings. So what that did to me was it created that I had to sort of lean on some other type of function. And that function was learning my intuition. And even at that point thereafter, I started to learn different ways of communicating and learning my intuitions and such. And I took a course on kinesiology for, I think it was 2 years or something. And when I finished it, I was told by my guide that I could not rely on anything physical to determine my information. Nothing physical. In other words, like in kinesiology, you can test muscle test, you can use your finger. There's all different ways to do a physical testing, but that I was not to use that in my work in any way. I was completely to rely on the information and understand it clearly, because that's what my mission here was partially about and how I was going to fulfill my mission. And now hindsight, I completely understand. If I didn't have the gift of vision and a sense of things and hearing and such, and I relied on physical more, I would not have the abilities and capabilities that I have today to be able to read the way I do. And I've been told by many people that I'm spot on when I read. And how would I know that? I don't really know. You don't know what you're reading. You just give information, and it's up to the person to tell you how accurate or how clear it is for them. So, yes, sometimes it comes in a very big way, depending on what it is your use, and purpose is.
I find a lot of the psychics that I know, they've died, and every time they come back, it's like they're cranked up a bit.
I can absolutely imagine that. Yeah.
Now you've graciously donated a past life regression to the people who support me on Patreon on the monthly draws, and the lady who's doing the psychic readings, Marianne Morgan, she's died 5 times, and she knows when she's going to die again. She tries to forget it, and last time she was out riding her horse, and she said, "Oh, this is very familiar. Oh, I know what's going to happen." Boom! Fell off the horse, smashes her head, and flatlines. But she's better now. But when she comes back, it's all cranked up again. It's amazing. And in your case, you didn't have to die. You just had a medical switch thrown. So it's changed.
Yeah, we learn in all different ways, I think. And so what I've seen with some people that have had death experiences like that, and I don't know if this is her case, but many times it's to wake a person up because they're not on their path. And so I've seen this in numerous near-death experiences, but this is not to say this is the, general for all people who do have this experience.
Oh, yeah. It's quite a wake-up call,
yeah.
I would assume. From a fellow I used to ride motorcycles with in a veterans motorcycle group. He had a heart attack, and he did the whole hovering above himself on the table. And what happened? His motorcycle, his wife was at home when he had the heart attack, and the motorcycle started to glow in the garage.
Wow.
She said, "Well, this is weird," and she's looking for the light source, and it just dimmed. But that was when he came back into the body. She didn't know he was in the hospital at this point. And exactly at the same time that he left the body and was hovering, the motorcycle was glowing, and then into the body again. And he completely, like you say, changed directions in his life.
Yeah, and many times that's exactly what it will do. But that has to do with the person actually engaging and choosing that. Because here on Earth, it's all about free will. there is, like I mentioned in my book numerous times, there is no being that is standing over you and saying you must do this, or pointing the finger, or saying, getting upset with you, you're not doing this or whatever, because it's about your free will. Of course, they're there to guide you, but it is your free will to choose what you want to do. And there's no right or wrong in this. The great part is that even those that commit suicide, they will come back to do it again. So if you don't get it right, you're just going to do it again. Now, that's maybe the good and bad of it.
Yeah, I guess it is. I read,
Yeah.
You gave me some excerpts of the book, and I see it as quite a, what can I say? What's the word? It's right on the tip of my tongue. Come on, you're sensitive. You should know what I'm thinking.
You're funny. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Exactly. No, but I was reading through your book, and or the excerpts of the book, and I find it quite a. I'm gonna have to edit this out because it's inspirational.
Oh, okay.
It's an inspirational book. It actually inspires people to not only think about what else may be out there, but what's inside of them, and how that connects. And it inspires them. It would inspire the reader to dig deeper in themselves, and I think that's always a fascinating. Well, not fascinating. It's a wonderful thing to do, to take somebody on an inward journey.
Yeah, at the end of each chapter, there's what I call food for thought, and I've said this for many years. I call it food for thought because they're just questions to make us think about things that we don't think about every day. And yet, like I've had many clients come in and they often say to me, wow, that's a really good question. And I'll say to them, well, I try to only ask the good ones, but it's about digging in and out of one question, that can take you in so many places. But these are questions that we don't ask ourselves quite often, or we might only ask at a particular time in our life. So each chapter it's filled with some type of learning and a little bit of a synopsis about what I gained from that learning, whether it was my own personal learning or somebody else's. And then some questions for you to ask your own self. And those questions, I hope, are inspiring to stop in your tracks at some point. Give yourself some time to reflect on who you are, what you're doing here, what you want to achieve. In fact, one of the chapters, I think it's chapter 5, I talk about tips for what you're doing, what your purpose is. This is one way these ideas can help unfold what your purpose might be. But another aspect, or in addition to, is just stop and think, what are you really drawn to in your life? What gives you joy and happiness and passion inside? And if you're not doing your passion, you may not be fulfilling your purpose, And so it's time to stop and really take a good look at it, And I really do hope this inspires many people to just ask themselves these internal questions.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's asking ourselves and not being influenced a lot by others. We live each day being surrounded by other humans, each on their own path. Some, like you said, overlapping ours because, in the soul groups or soul pods. But at some points of our lives, we pay too much attention to what others want to get us to do, or what we what they want us to think about and have over influence on ourselves, when we should really just take a step back and think, who's it going to be best for? Is this good for me? What should I do next?
Yeah, and this is where a lot of our illusions come from. They're fed from our society, our family, in many, many different ways. The media has a huge impact on this. This is why sometimes really just shutting your TV off is a very, very good thing. But at the end of my book, at the end of the 11th chapter, I have a phrase, and I love this this quote. It says, "We were born not to be ideal, but to be real, not to become someone else, but to become ourselves." Dan Millman, that's a quote from him, and I love that. In fact, I really enjoy his reading. He's written many books, and I was inspired by his books also many, many years ago. They were brought to me through my youngest son, who was on a particular personal track to, and I do talk about this in the book, looking for when you come into maybe your young teens, you're coming into yourself as you're growing up, and you need something that will help you come into that time. And native wisdom offers very much that, but we don't have too much of that in our culture. So my son actually found these books, and when he was finished reading them, he passed them on to me, and I was hugely inspired by the writing in that. But the illusions that we own, whether they come from another time or from this particular current time, we are influenced so much by other people. And how do we find out who we really are is such a big question. So many people ask that I hear when I'm out there in the populace, talking with people in that all over the country, out of the country and such. We want to know how to find out who we are. And I talk about this in the book too, because this to me is the greatest gift you can give yourself, is to know who you really are. And it's not to say that suddenly all the illusion will fall away and you're never going to experience that again, because that's not real. But when I do a past life and I bring somebody into the between reality, okay, and I have you merge with your higher self again being the part of your soul that always remains in the spirit form and is connected to everything, to all of consciousness, okay, throughout the galaxies and universes, okay? So when you meet who you really are, you do experience the real you, the authentic you, and that is the most magnificent experience you'll ever have, because it shows you how much of your story, how much of your illusion you are still connected to, and how much then, having had this experience now, what you really want to let go of. And how much you really do want to let go of it. Because we all aspire to want to feel that magnificence of who we are. And we all are. We all are this pure soul within ourselves. We just carry a lot of junk, a lot of baggage, a lot of illusion. And how do we get rid of that? Once you've experienced who you are, it will change your life. And you'll begin to make movement toward letting go of that. Because now you know who you really are.
That's fascinating. I had what almost was kind of I experienced what almost was like a regression, but it was more of a channeling with a psychic. And I traveled to a place where I was a very tall person, bald, with a kind of an upturned nose, and there was a lot of other beings that looked like me, and wandered through an area underground into a big hall and sat down and came out of it. And the person who was taking me through this was asking me all the questions about it. And they said, who are you? And I said, I'm my higher self. But I was an ET. I wasn't a floaty soul kind of fluffy thing. I was just one of a whole bunch of other very tall beings that looked like me, kind of, but all, we had different clothing and it was kind of typical. But that was kind of what I saw. And then afterwards, we came out of that and she said, who else are you? And I said, I am my primary spirit guide.
Yeah.
So I was not only my higher self, but I was my guide. My primary spirit guide is me. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's common if you're an interplanetary soul, or what you would call an extraterrestrial, which there is a difference. Interplanetaries can be extraterrestrials, but many times some of us come from a different vibration, which our origination is not through an extraterrestrial, but comes directly from source and born of source. So there's multi ways if you're not an earth-based soul. But many times if you are an IP, your master guide is usually you and also your higher self. You're one and of the same. Not to say that you don't or can't have a guide, because sometimes you do for a specific reason, but more times than not, you are what we call a combo. And I do address that also in the book because cool. I've had that experience too. So like yourself, I am actually my personal guide, but I am also my high self. And so when embodied, I'm all of those beings all together because of being advanced enough to be able to handle that as you're in the wisdom of your soul.
Okay. The very first time I ever spoke to a psychic who pointed out my spirit guide, she had described him as looking like he was from Egypt from about 30,000 years ago. And I asked what his name was, and she said he's laughing because, we people are always asking for names, but he didn't have one. So I just called him Matthew. And her description of him is 30,000 years ago. And it was in Egypt was similar, or like the being that I saw. And not too long after that reading, I had a photograph taken on some machine developed in California that takes pictures and shows like different beings around you, allegedly. And I had this Polaroid, was sitting on the desk at a conference, or the table at a conference, and a shaman, Derek White Skycloud, walked by and he glanced at it and said, "Oh, your spirit guides are ETs," and he walked away. I said, "What? They're ETs?" And it dawned on me that the psychic had told me that my spirit guide had never been terrestrial. Well, went right over both of our heads. That meant he's not from here. And then it totally made sense after this other thing in June that I went through and, so this is all coming together now from the other person I was working with. So are you kind of like me then? That kind of interplanetary mix of spirit guide is your higher self, which is you, kind of
yes.
Snake eating its tail. Yeah.
So I want to address a couple things that you're talking about. I'll answer that question first. So yes, I am my own guide. I am my high self. So they are all sort of wrapped into one, so to speak. And when I call on a guide, it's not necessarily my personal guide the way people will have a master spirit guide with them. I'm assuming that I no longer really need that. Maybe I did at one time, but I no longer have that because of where my soul has evolved in vibration and understanding. So it's not necessary any longer. That's not to say that I don't have some type of guidance, which I do. Some or one aspect of some of my guidance comes from what is called the emissary of light, and that is 12 entities, which are all one entity, and yet each in their own aspect. And that might be a little hard to wrap the head around, as you're trying to image that in the brain. But this is what my understanding is. And I am one of those 12, but my own personal aspect has chosen to come here and embody to do what I do. I'm told, and I do touch on this in my book also, one of the channeled times that I've channeled this entity is called Megalithicon, and it comes to bring a lot of information to me. And the reason being is so that I will turn around and share the information and share the healing. Brings a lot of information about healing with other people because of the kind of work that I do, because I'm a person that goes out and I share and I speak with people. And there's one way is writing a book to get the information out to people. But within this concept of the soul and the guides, they are not my guides. They are coming to just guide in this particular time right now that I'm in and what I'm doing. And I actually did have a time, or a journey, I call it, when I went back to be with my counsel, and there was a chair at the table, so to speak. And I asked what the chair was for, and they said it was my chair. And I felt like if I sat in my chair at the council, I probably wouldn't come back to Earth again. So I didn't take a seat at the council meeting, but I did receive the information I was supposed to. Something else that you touched on, the name of a guide. Many times guides will provide information for a person in the way that the person will be able to receive the information. So a lot of times they'll give you a name that is a familiar name of some sort, George, Harry, Gertrude, whatever, okay? And then sometimes there are those guides that will come and they don't really give you a name because they don't put their name into a verbal understanding. So it may come as a symbol, it can come as a tone, it can come as a sound, it can come just as an energy feeling. And that a lot of times will be because they're of a higher vibration and they don't fit within some concept. So they come in all different ways and colors and shapes and forms. There are those guides that come from what we call the galactic energy grid, which is above or outside of the Earth's energy grid. And within the galactic grid, there are many spirits in that, many high vibrational spirits that are fit within that grid. And they may not even be able to come to Earth in a form because their vibration and they are so massive that they can't fit into our consciousness. So they may show up possibly as an orb or in another facet because they can't really encapsulate within a certain embodiment. And so that fits with possibly why they'll come as a sound or a tone or a symbol, depending on what they're coming to tell you also.
Oh, that's interesting. We're talking to Laurie Wheeler. Please go check her website out, wellnesswithin.net. You can find the book, Oh No, Not Another Learning Experience, A Metamorphosis. Check out Amazon, Smashwords, Barnes & Noble, and iTunes. Laurie, your spirit guides, have you kind of found that they rotate in and out? Now that you don't really have them that connected as they used to be because you're kind of doing your own thing, or actually your own path, I guess I should say. But when you're younger, when you first start realizing you had them, did they come in at different ones at certain times of your life?
The answer to that is yes and sort of no.
Okay.
They and this is just me, so I can't speak for everybody. For many people, you may just have one master spirit guide, and then you'll have teachers, helpers, and such, depending.
Okay.
And I want to talk about spirits and how the levels of spirits and such. But for me personally, I did have some helpers and teachers, and I still do have them in certain capacities. They come and share information with me. But as far as a guide, right now in my life, I have this particular counsel and these aspects. It's not even individuations, so to speak, the way the brain would think. They're just aspects of energy, okay? And they will just upload information to me, okay? As I go in and ask, they just send me what I need to hear. Previously, in my earlier lifetimes, though, like I said, I have worked with helpers and teachers, and that I have worked with so many that at a certain time in my life, I just stopped asking who they were because so many would come in. And for a very little while, I might have a grandmother come in, or a little while I might see, I have a real close ache into Native American wisdom and culture. But because I lived in Mexico and because I'm very connected to Central America and South America, a lot of guides will come in that way. Sometimes Aboriginal guides will come in that way to specifically talk. I do a lot of shamanic gatherings and teachings and journey work. And when we gather together, there may be a specific one, that a spirit that comes in to do a specific job. So they're there to plant and create a fire. Maybe they're creating some type of healing, or they're wanting to have a ceremony of some type, or whatever the gathering is about and the intention is about. So then there may be one that assigns itself specifically to that happening. That's a very good oftentimes a possibility that will occur. So I do want to talk a little bit about tasks. The spirit realm is kind of similar to the realm that we're accustomed to here on Earth. So as you may have a job as a sanitation worker, then you may have a job as a teacher, then you may have a job as a rocket scientist, and you'll look at the different levels of knowledge, okay, and wisdom. Such is the same in the spirit world, okay? When a being transforms into and remains in the spirit, now they're early on in their learning of spirit form, okay? So they may be equal to a sanitation worker here, okay, in that level. Then as they evolve as a spirit, then they may come into being the teacher, and then maybe the master teacher, and then they'll, and it will just continue to evolve, but in the spirit form. So there are different tasks each one has. And so we can have multi-spirits throughout our life for specific reasons. So you may have one that has deemed itself and attached itself for health reasons, and then maybe something to do with your job, and maybe something to do with relationship. So you will have numerous ones. And I've had many people read me or look at me and say, oh my gosh, you have so many spirits behind you. And they all have jobs and different things that they're there for. So, yeah, that's the way the spirit realm works for all of us, actually.
When I do readings, I do a thing called a stand-up reading now that's kind of developed over the last couple of years, where sometimes I'll be looking at someone and a relative of theirs will come through and stand beside them. And it's what I get is the for them to communicate with their guides, their vibration has to be very, very high, and the guide has to really drop it down. So we have a volunteer come through, kind of being that in between. And I get hand signals, and every so often I'll get like a full on download of something I have to say, but I don't really hear them, and I only see them from like maybe mid thigh to the waist up, unless they want to show me something on their feet. More to do with identity, showing, make sure that this person knows I've got rubber boots on, then they'll know that I'm grandmother. That kind of thing, but I usually don't see them like that. And I feel when I read cards for people, it's kind of a direct line to guides. But with this person coming through, this spirit of a loved one comes through, they're the in-between. And in June, I was finding, it was the first time I realized that about a car length behind them, about a 7-foot tall being would show up. And I had no idea who this was. And they looked like pre-European First Nations or Central Americans. And I've been told it was an ET. Just lately I was told this was an ET. It was somebody looked like in one of the monk's robes, but the top of their head, it wasn't rounded at the top. It was kind of pointed up. In like a big diamond shape, and the inside of the face was just black. Well, you couldn't see the face. It was just standing there. And I'm looking at the person I'm reading thinking, how am I going to explain this? I have no idea what this is, and it's kind of freaking me out. But those are coming a little bit more. And I'm seeing them as protective beings. That's the vibe I'm getting from them. Or the people I were reading were from Central America or Mexico or be American Indian, and they had the big shaman-looking beings behind them. And one being specifically showed up for two different people, one in Arizona and one in California, but it was the same being. So it's all new to me, this spirit realm, this other side of things, and I'm getting just these little glimpses and peeks into them. My guides, my mother's side of the family, which is the kind of the spiritual side of the family I kind of lean to, goes back to their family showed up in Massachusetts in around 1607. And from Scotland, and before that they were in Ireland, and before that, who the heck knows? Because Ancestry.com, it's all kind of goes back to about 1000 BC, and it's all verbal legend at that point about my family. So they've been around for a while. The connection with that side of my family, though, is kind of weird, and I kind of drift back to the colonial times, because I had a spirit guide come through actually on the winter solstice, December 21st, 2015. She came out of the water, and her name was Annabella, and she had a three-peaked hat, tri-peaked hat, and was wearing she was dressed like a man. Very, very handsome woman, though. Very beautiful woman. Tall. And she was in this, blue coat, a blue jacket with a frilled shirt underneath, and this tri-peaked hat. And that was my guide. And I had no idea where she was coming from, but she was the most human one that I ever had. After Annabella, because I got in spiritual crap, what happened was I was doing readings for people, and I wasn't confident. So I do a reading, I phoned a psychic saying, this is what I did, was it okay? So eventually all my guides were saying, just leave them alone for a while. So then I had the Gohart step in, which is Pan, the Greek god of the hillside. So he was a little mischievous guy, but he was in for a long time. I got into more, and I had after my spiritual time out, everything was going on, and he was still there. And then I had a tree basically step in. It was almost described as a tree being, but it was protective, and all my abilities were shut completely off because I was being attacked by elemental beings from under the house I was living in before. So this thing came in to say, no, this is a protection, and you cannot be open anymore until you move in another few weeks, which I was. So he was there, and then he moved on, and now I've got this Norith who stepped forward. So I'm guessing these are the not spirit guides per se, but are they kind of like the helpers, the little teachers that come, not little teachers, but the teachers that come through at certain times that spur me on?
Well, that's an interesting question. They can be. It sounds like some of them are. We also have many spirits here on the earth, and there are many of them that are actually caught in that between space and time, but haven't completely crossed over. And they also try to connect with us. So whether some of them are your guides or helpers or teachers, and it sounds like they are, one thing I would suggest is to better develop your clair abilities. So it sounds to me like your vision, you're pretty adept at your vision. You see things, but it sounds like your clairaudience, hearing things, may need to be more developed so that you can have better communication with your guides. And that's not to say all the clair abilities become that predominant for us. Mm-hmm. Some of us are or weigh and use more heavier into certain ones than other ones. You always find that somebody's stronger in one than the rest. But they teach us how to do this so that you can become better at it. I had to learn that long ago when I first came into this, how to listen. Listening is a very important factor. Because not always will you have a vision at a very moment, but you'll have that voice that will speak to you. And also that internal knowing, that sense of things is also pretty strong too. So they come in so many different ways, and it sounds like you are surrounded by many of them. But I'm not sure they're all actually your guides or teachers. It could be that you're actually communicating with some that are just around you too. I mean, people will walk through a garden and say they see the fairies and the elves and the spirits that are of the trees and the plants. And there are so many spirits. It's so many different vibrations that are happening here. It just depends on at that moment. This is some of the important things that I have been asked many, many times over the last years, that I'm putting together classes that will have experiential guided hypnosis and deep trance work so that one can access what they need to access, and also develop their clair abilities and develop their connection to their guides. So many people, they have guides. They can actually see them or hear them. They want better connection too. Also, I say to people, trust is what I consider the most important aspect. And when I say that, it's a very fine line between what's real and what's real, okay? And in shamanic terms, they believe, shamans of indigenous cultures, that the reality is really in that deep place of the darkness where you create, and then this is the illusion. And I really love that, and I can really understand that. So it's building a trust in what you see. Also, that builds your clair ability. So if you're not trusting, that means you're blocking. So when I go to read somebody, I can tell you, I've read people that are what I call very sludgy. So if you can think of sludge, it's thick and gooey and it's just heavy. And the energy just isn't coming through very easily, okay? It's not my reading. It's the fact that this is how they are, how they're blocked and such. Their communication, their connection. They're not an open vessel. And then there are those, like animals, who are very easy to read. Animals, because they don't carry the baggage that human people do. So animals are very easy to read. But it all comes and falls within that concept of trusting what you're getting. So it's not like if you go in to read something or hear something or you see something, it's not, is that real or am I making it up? That's not the question that should even come to the brain. The question is, tell me more. Tell me more. Just assume that it is real and that there is no difference really between what's real and what is real.
Yeah. All right. Now I'm almost confused, but I totally got it.
Okay.
What's real and what is real is the same. It is fascinating, and as I'm kind of learning, and this has been going on since 2012, that I'm starting to understand this. Before that, I was seeing ghosts, like people who hadn't crossed over, just kind of walking around. Then that drifted away. I didn't see that for the longest time until I brought one home with me from a paranormal investigation, which, my bad. I didn't clear myself before I left. But I haven't seen them like when you and I look at each other in person. That is the way I saw them. I'll hear them a bit now, but it's me actually going out and looking for them. But now that I see the person standing beside somebody, the spirit, who shows me either what they look like around the time they passed or when they were younger. My mother always shows up, is in her late 20s, early 30s, because that's when she was having the most fun. And she knows what I look like. She knows that I knew what she looked like then. So when someone sees her and describes her as that, yeah, I know that's my mother. But it's still kind of interesting that I see them. I get the hand signals, and I'm getting really good at all the hand signals. And then I don't hear them. I just get. Does that make sense? I just get what to say next.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're not actually seeing them. You're just getting a sense of it. So that's helping you to develop that sense within yourself so that it's just a different aspect of your clair abilities. And there are many spirits of a lower vibration, or those that have not crossed over, that are stuck in the between realm here on the earth, for one reason or another. And many times that happens because they've had either a sudden death or they haven't had somebody help them cross over. And there's numerous reasons why they haven't crossed, but they will attach themselves. Again, I speak about this in my book because we on the land had hundreds of souls that didn't cross over due to the war party that came in and murdered many of the people in this tribe. And so there were many that were wandering, and we built our house on this burial ground. Didn't know it at the time. And so what happened was the spirit came to me and asked me if I would help them cross. And I explained all this. This is in chapter 1 about, well, what do I know? I don't know how to do this. I'm not even sure I understand all of this at that time. So this was my awakening. And so I understand this full well, what that is exactly like when spirit or spirits attach themselves. And we had a young girl, she might have been about 10 years old, so to speak, in spirit form, wandering our house for several years. And we caught glimpses of her. My dog knew where she was. I mean, and I explain all of this in the book. And it's pretty interesting how they just, what happened with her is that she attached herself to a family because her family was gone and she didn't have that family. So here we are. We're this unassuming family, and she just attached herself. And as I explain in the book, I went to try to sell my house, and she kept us from selling our house. So you'll have to read the book to find out more, but it's an interesting happening, what goes on. And I eventually helped her cross over, and that was part of my learning and connection. So my my connections have come in numerous ways to teach me, but it's all a matter of just peeling back the veil. I liken it to seeing through a window. You can't quite put your hand through it, so to speak, but you can see it. It's right there, you know. You may not hear it really clearly, but it's right there. So that's pulling back the veil, and it is really there. It's just a different vibration is all it really is. And there are many of those souls that wander the earth. I mean, I lived in Hawaii, and I can tell you the Hawaiians realize how sacred their land is because there are so many spirits that walk the earth. I've been in so many places where you can feel the spirits. I've been downtown Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which was a red light district. And just walking down there, you can see the girls in spirit form hanging out the windows, calling to the sailors. You know, it's just... they're all over the place. They're just all over. And if you're seeing them or hearing them, the one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to be open enough to bring them, to allow them to attach themselves to you and bring them home. Okay? Yeah. And that is the danger zone, because in numerous ways that's the danger zone, and can happen so easily. They can attach themselves. So you have to really be careful. You have to cleanse yourself. You also have to do your own energy around yourself. And you have to be of a high vibration yourself. If you are of a high enough light and vibration, they cannot attach themselves to you. Okay, they could be maybe in a space where you are, but they cannot literally attach themselves to you or cause you illness that way. But I know of so many that have had that happening and have needed clearing or have needed to have those souls detach and find another place to be, to let go. So that's a common thing.
Especially now with all the paranormal investigator types wanting to go out to old buildings or in the forests and things. And they're, you know, here's a flashlight and a tape recorder. I'm going to go out and a tape recorder. Yeah, I'm old. A recorder, and then going out and saying, hey, if there's a ghost around here, come and touch me. And yeah, you can come over here. In fact, you can come home with me if you want. It's like, no, don't invite them. You can't get rid of them that way. Yeah,
don't invite them. Yeah, that's part of it.
Yes. We were talking to the author of, oh no, not another learning experience, a metamorphosis. It is a life journey of Laurie Wheeler. Please go to our website, wellnesswithin.net. Laurie, part of what we're talking about, we're talking about ghosts and we're talking about spirits and different levels of realms, but you also, in your book, you touch on extraterrestrials. Give me an idea of what types of things you've run into in your experience with the ETs.
Oh, I've had many experiences. There's a few more of recent than the older ones, but in my book, I talk in one chapter about a woman who is she's an abductee, and a multi-generation abductee, and that's a common thing. With certain extraterrestrials, they will work within your lineage. In other words, your father could have been, you are, and maybe your children are, okay? And I think the reasoning behind that is that once they begin some type of happening with you in their implants or whatever that they're doing with you biologically, they want to follow to see what happens, because you're a lab experiment, ultimately, okay? And that's the good and bad of it, I'm going to say. It's really hard to discern whether it's good or bad, because there's a lot of information in it, and we won't go into all of it. But this particular person that I speak of toward the end of my book, and she had come from another state, and she had come in to do some work with me, and I had done some energy work first with her to sort of prime the situation. because she had told me a lot of her memory had been wiped out and such. And so I wanted to do some energy work. I wanted to get my energy to feel what was going on with her. What was I going to have the experience of in that? And that's one way that I'll have a good sense of things. So I did some energy work with her, and that sort of laid the groundwork of what was happening. And then we did a past life and between life regression the following day. And I got to, in both times, but more specifically, the energy work. This is the chapter, so I don't want to give it all away, but it's a pretty interesting read what happens. I did get to speak with the extraterrestrials, and we did come face to face. And at one point, they tell me not to bother their work that's going on. And I thought, I kind of got a little bold, to say the least, and I stood up to them. Now, they're pretty powerful beings, I'm going to tell you. And this was sort of a reaction of mine. And something said to me to just stand in front of them and say, this is a soul, and you do not have the right to the soul's identity and energy. You are taking without asking, and that is not right. And so we went around about it a little bit, and I talk about that in the chapter. And it's pretty interesting when you stand up to an extraterrestrial, I'm going to tell you. It takes a lot of guts. Right or wrong, that's exactly what I did. But as an outcome, I will tell you that it was a great outcome for the woman. And you'll have to read the chapter to find out how it all happens. But it was for her benefit, the way it all happened. So another more recent time with extraterrestrials, I was out at the Blind Frog Ranch. And we were doing a shamanic journey out there with a group of people. And let's see who it was. The Dracos came, the reptilians came, the insectoids came. They all came out in their own fashion and way, and came to me and they wanted to see what we were doing, what was going on there, and it was pretty interesting talking with them. I've talked with numerous extraterrestrials, and I really don't have a fear of them. I'm just mindful of their power and who they are and what they are. There is what I consider evil and bad and good and positive, all within all aspects of all creations. So I just am mindful of that, and I state my piece, and I find out what's going on and what I need to learn, why they are there, and I tell them what I am there. One of the extraterrestrials I saw came down in or is there, but just cloaked in a gold spaceship. And I could see them coming and going from the earth. And they are retracting particular minerals and that which is in the earth that is very specific to this real specific area of Utah. And the one came up to me very close, not more than 2 feet away from me. And it kind of tipped its head like as if it was curious. And it said to me, "We are as curious of you as you are of us." And I thought, oh, that's interesting. It's something I wouldn't have thought of. I just thought, I'm curious of you. I hadn't thought of what were you thinking, Mm-hmm. So it was nice to hear from it that and I liked its vibration, this particular entity that showed. It was really good. Actually, how it came is I was sitting in toning on the top of the mountain there, and it just showed up due to the toning. And that's happened many, many, many times. So,
what is toning?
Toning is just sending out a sound and just moving with the sound that feels what you feel compelled, what level to bring your voice and just make a sound. like how you would say Om. That's a sound. It's not really a word. It's a sound. It's a tone. So this is this particular tone, like octaves in music. It's a sound that goes out. And to extraterrestrials and other IPs and energies out there, spirits, they resonate to certain vibration. And so when I work with people, actually, there's a raising of vibration. I've worked with the earth in raising vibration. There was a time when I lived in Hawaii and we went to sacred ground, and all the chiefs of the islands showed up energetically, and they actually gave us leis, which is their way of welcoming people in Hawaii. And they thanked us for raising the vibration of the land by just doing what we were doing. So raising vibration is bringing in light and letting go of the heavy or the darkness. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So, it's interesting. There's a lot of paranormal activity out at the Blind Frog Ranch where I've been, and will continue to go back and work with them more and more. But I've been out in Sedona. I've been all over the place. And heard from the extraterrestrials. So, but it's quite interesting when they catch you. Because I remember out in Sedona, this was many years ago, I was sitting, we were doing just some music. My husband plays the didgeridoo, the Aboriginal didgeridoo, and I play the drum. And this is how we do our journey work, whether it be in a gathering or by ourselves. And we were sitting out one of the vortexes one afternoon, and we're playing, and the spirits contacted us, and they said to us, "We're the ancient ones." And my brain immediately, way back when, said, "Oh, you mean the Native American people?" Because that's what I thought. That's what my brain registered. Okay. And they said, "No, we are the original ones." And I was like, "Oh, those original ones." And then they proceeded to tell me information in that. But I thought, wow, there it is, just from the tone of the music. So a lot of times, this is a good way to attract and speak with them. And in my book, I have 2 symbols that I've been given, and I talk about what the symbols are, and they're there to be utilized by every person that uses the book or reads the book, because they're for us to share this sacred geometry and what it means. So it can enhance healing and understanding for us.
Oh, good. I'm looking for a new tattoo.
There you go. Very good.
Yeah. Have you seen my, I've got a, well, I guess I don't think you have seen them. Well, I got a tattoo when I was in Sedona, and actually inside the tattoo is parts of the Bell Vortex. It's actually nice. The tattoo artist has ink made from the iron oxide that's in each of the 6 vortexes, and my Kokopelli is filled with the Bell Vortex, because that's the one that I really resonated to and hung out on for the longest time. Yeah. So, yeah, and magical. That's where I also saw all my UFOs, was up in Sedona. Oh, it's a very high vibration. That's why it's on a ley line, and when you're on a ley line, there's a heavy. And not a heavy, but it's a strong vibration on the ley lines. It's not haphazard. There is nothing chaotic or haphazard having to do with our universe. And much of it hinges on what we call mathematics, So the ley lines are the same way. And Sedona is on one of those ley lines, like the Egyptian pyramids and such, And my house, actually.
Your house. Oh, yeah. No. a high vibration. That's interesting. Yeah, you can feel it when if you're sensitive to energy and you happen to be in one of these places, maybe where the pyramids are or such, you can feel it. It's so apparent to you. You may not know that that's what it is, but you may say, well, why do I feel a little dizzy, or why do I feel this or that, And that is what it is. Energy, when it's It's like, I want to say, if you're a 110 amp and it's like 220 coming in, you're going to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ah, that's interesting.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole idea of spirit guides, extraterrestrials, and those, we'll call them ghosts, the in-betweens, the ones that haven't crossed, all hanging out and all interacting. It's especially spirit guides and ETs. They're fascinating to me. And for those who don't know where the Blind Frog Ranch is, if you've heard of the Skinwalker Ranch, it's the other side of the fence. So,
so to speak, it is.
It's kind of the same neighborhood. So it's not that you have to be on one of those particular properties to have experiences. It's that whole area has activity for a reason. So the barbed wire fence or the guys with the guns and the golf carts aren't going to keep a bunch of reptilians from crossing from one side of the fence to the other.
They've been there thousands of years, so we have sort of treaded on what I call their territory. They were there first. We can all get along very well, but you have to know how to get along, so to speak, with these beings. And they have purpose there, what they're doing there. So one, it's understanding what their purpose is. But I can tell you what part of their purpose is, because I've had conversation with them and I understand this and I've read the energy. And I'll back up to the man that owns the Blind Frog Ranch, which is, like you said, connected to the Skinwalker Ranch. But the extraterrestrials, they don't know. There's a division in who owns the land, so it doesn't matter to them. There is a specific area where they are what I call mining certain properties from this particular area. And there is these properties that are here are nowhere else in the world, actually, because it's been tested and run through labs, and these are the findings. So this holds very special properties for these extraterrestrials. Now, my question was, well, if it's so special to the extraterrestrials, then it must be special to us too. And I was told by Megalithic, my entity that I speak with, that we don't have this technology yet, but it is teaching me about this. And so this is my classroom, so to speak, what I'm learning on this particular land. And I'll just back up where I met this man at a particular conference. And actually, my husband met him and then said, you should get a reading from my wife. It's only 20 minutes, but she could probably tell you a thing or two. Something might be interesting. And so he came over. I did a reading with him, and I told him things. He said to me, nobody knows this stuff. And I told him things about the land and what was being extracted, about the extraterrestrials, and it just blew him away. He's like, nobody knows this particular information. How do you know that? So I built a trust with him, and I was invited out to his property. I've done a lot of reading. The water is very special there. There's all kinds of things happening out there. It's the end of the Incan Trail. There's all kinds of things. They're going to be doing a Discovery Channel documentary coming up. It's in the works right now. So, and we are going to be doing retreats out there. So anybody who's interested in extraterrestrials and may want to either camp out or learn more, you can go to my website, send me an email. We're looking for people that would be very interested, and we want to bring this information forward, both the owner and myself, because it's about learning. We're all communing together, let's put it that way.
And where would somebody get a hold of you at? Just at your website?
Yeah, they can go on my website. There's a little window usually pops up. They can send me an email at homeopathy2@aol.com. I can spell that HOMEOPATHY2, which is the number 2 at AOL.com. If you Google my name, you'll find me. You can find a phone number for me. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So anyone who's interested, you'll find me.
And that's Laurie D. Wheeler.
Yeah.
Laurie, please put the D in there because there's a couple of other ones out there.
Yeah, there are. One of them being a singer. She's not me.
Yeah, and the first time I looked for you, I had your obituary, and I thought, oh my God, she was 93 when she died. It was amazing.
Oh,
she died 6 years ago. I think I'm late. Or just go to the website wellnesswithin.net and surf your way through there. It's fascinating. I'm really looking forward to going to the Blind Frog. Actually, my buddy and I went to Sturgis, South Dakota on our motorcycles last year, and we were going to come back through Utah and go past the Skinwalker Ranch. So and we're going again this year for the 80th anniversary. So I'm thinking, hey, on the way back now, we'll do that because we did Devil's Tower and the Battle of Bighorn and a few other kind of sacred places, and it's kind of good. And then we thought, no, we should go to Utah, but the weather wasn't, it was mid-August, the weather was getting a little cranky up in that area, so we didn't want to chance it. So, but this year we might just take a slide by and just in that area itself, like you say, it's not restricted by a fence line. ETs aren't really, they didn't go to the county and say, well, I need to know who owns all this land because we don't want to trespass. But yeah, it'd be interesting. And it'd be also interesting to talk to just the people up there, the locals, honestly, the kid who pumps gas at the gas station to the sheriff who works the area. They'd be full of really cool stories about what's going on up there.
Yeah, the native people really know what's happening. This is actually a parcel of land that is in and of itself the Blind Frog Ranch. Everything else around it is Native American land and reservation, but this was deemed separate by the government. Now, when the government doesn't sell everything, it's holding on to something, then you say to yourself, well, then there's something of importance there, why? And so the development of that began out of sort of that. And there's a whole big story to it. I'd invite you to go to their website, Blind Frog Ranch, and learn more. But if you come out, we'll talk with the extraterrestrials. We'll probably have night vision goggles so you can see what's going up in the stars and the sky and that. We're just going to make a great time of it and see what's what. Be open to a gathering, I'll say.
That would be perfect.
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun.
I can use I bought one of those little night vision goggle things that actually record. And I use one of those. It doesn't zoom in or anything, but what I found when I was in Sedona watching the groups of UFOs flying, you're still looking at them through night vision. It doesn't really zoom in, but when you see what you see, there are a bunch of what looks like a satellite, but they travel in groups, and you hit them with a couple of times with a handheld laser, and they get 10 times brighter, and then they dim back down again. UFOs don't travel in groups. I mean, not UFOs, but satellites don't travel in groups.
No.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I can tell you they're unidentified. They're flying in their objects.
Right, exactly.
That's all I can tell you.
Yeah.
I don't know who's piloting them, whether they're a bunch of guys from S4 or, down near Area 51 or Area 52, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever areas they have now. But I have no idea who's piloting them, but they're kind of fun to watch.
Yeah.
I was absolutely fascinated. I went out kind of like, I came in to see a UFO. It's like, holy crap, I see a UFO.
Yeah, it's amazing how much is really going on out there that you do not see with the naked eye. Then you look through the night vision goggles and you see all the activity that happens. You're just amazed at what's going on that you really aren't privy to, Oh,
it's amazing. And you first get out there and you can tell, okay, this is a military jet because it has a strobe light on it. So you see those scooting across the sky, and then you see the commercial jets with their lights on it. And then you see these things that are further out, about 13, 14 miles out, or up, I guess. And it was fascinating. And then Melinda Leslie, who put the tour on that I went on, a friend of mine, she said, we had some couples, a bunch of couples came out one night, and they were all giddy about seeing UFOs. And a couple of the guys in the couple, they said, hey, if you look over there, there's actually a portal they come and go from. And Melinda said, portal? What do you mean? Isn't it, they just kind of disappear in that direction? He goes, no, they disappear, but they come from there, don't they? She said, yeah, we've seen them coming. How do you know it's a portal? And he looked at her and said, we're from NASA.
Yeah.
We actually are bringing our wives out here to see UFOs.
Oh, that's
but
funny.
They knew the portal was there.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see the portals. So it's the same out in Utah at the ranch here. The portals have been seen, and that's an interesting thing when you see that happen. And you have to be careful whether you're going to step into that or not. I had an experience once with a portal, and I was asked by the light beings if I wanted to walk in or stay. I won't tell you what occurred during that time because that's in my book, but so you'll have to read it for all these intriguing questions. But it was a fascinating happening and a most one of those big life happenings. I mean, just the most amazing thing for me. If I could talk about 5 top things in life, that was one of them, right up there. So the whole happening was amazing, and I love taking people to places to experience this so that they can have similar happenings also. I also want to mention about the classes again that I'm going to be putting together, if I can, James. It's about the development of who you are as your soul, learning your purpose, understanding that, coming into learning more about your guides, learning how to trust better, more about earth-based souls and interplanetary souls and the cosmos and who's out there. My learning Megalithicon will be channeling and working with me on this because it wants people to understand about these vibrations that exist that are watching over things. It's been giving me information about black holes lately and what's going on with black holes and the entering in and it tells me that there are beings that are protecting the outer rim of black holes and all this information that I'm not on the internet reading this. This is coming through to me. So more about souls and connection and how to have a better connection and grounding and just all of that. So this is what the classes will be. They're coming up. If you're interested, you can let me know and I'll send that information out to you then.
And again, that's wellnesswithin.net. Go to wellnesswithin.net. Keep an eye on the classes that are coming up. Laurie Wheeler, thank you very much for dropping by. This has been great, and I'm definitely grabbing your book, Oh No, Not Another Learning Experience, A Metamorphosis by Dr. I did it again. That D throws me off with my dyslexia. Laurie D. Wheeler. It's fascinating. You're a fascinating woman, and I love talking to you about this stuff.
Well, thank you.
I learn a lot every time we have a sit down and we chat. And I'm really looking forward to coming out to the Blind Frog Ranch. I, too, like taking people out on and sharing and showing and saying, look in the sky, look under the rock, look at the tree. It's great stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So we'll have a great gathering. Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate the time and sharing the information with people. So
thank you.
My shadow has a life of its own, watching you while you sleep all alone.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. And hey! Let's be careful out there.
Far over the snow